I don't know a better way to describe it besides like when I am genuinely really excited and it has all those pieces I'm looking for. It's like I like it visually. Like I really love the concept. I think it's pushing, or like I'm able to tell a story in a different way, or like this is something I didn't really like try to capture before visually. I like want to draw like all the time, or like right away, like right after work. I like go to my desk and I'm like, I'm gonna do this right now.
And welcome to another episode of Art of the Base Sessions. Today we are joined by illustrator Lys. How's it going?
Hi, good. Thanks for having me here today.
Yeah, no, I'm so excited. Like, I feel like this has been a long time coming since like we've been working on a bunch of different projects together, and we've run into each other at different shows. That I'm so excited that you're here.
Yeah, it's great being in this space because I've seen this so many times online, and just like through the podcast, through all the videos. It's crazy being here with everything in 3D. It's amazing.
Yeah, like we try to like update the theme of everything every season. So like you're seeing like the third season. Yeah. I always forget what season we're on to. But yeah, thanks again for joining us. How you been?
Pretty good. I feel like I'm still recovering from the last event because it was so amazing. But you know, all these like vending and everything happening throughout the year. It's like you always need an introvert kind of vacation from some of these things. Yeah, and especially with holidays coming up, it's like there's so many cool things coming up for artists, like Inktober. October has a ton of things, and holiday markets in the fall. So yeah, just kind of like preparing for the end of the year. Yeah, but pretty good so far.
That's good. Yeah, I totally understand. Like same thing, being introverted is just like, we do all these events and then I feel like we need like another day or even week sometimes to just like recover from all that interaction.
I'm in my recovery year right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
we gotta keep it moving.
Yeah, totally understand.
Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, we usually, I'm trying to reframe this question because every single time I try to explain it, I always fumble it. So I guess what I'll try to say now is, if you don't mind giving us like either your backstory or like your creative superhero moment. Like when did you start getting into like the creative field and like all these different avenues with your art?
Yeah, totally. So for me, it kind of goes way back to like early 2000s. Again, because I was so introverted as a kid and also as an adult, I think like just being online a lot and making online friends was like a really big part of how I spent a lot of afternoons after school. And I was on this website called GaiaOnline.com. I don't know if you were ever on it.
I've heard of it, but what was it like about usually?
It was literally just forums, mini games, kind of like Neopets, where you can interact with different things in these mini games. But you also had all these people online at any given time, like ready to talk about absolutely anything. And back in the day, the kind of like, I think the cool kids on Gaia Online had very nice avatars. So you spend a lot of online money to get like these headdresses or these necklaces and dresses and whatnot. So as a way to get the drippiest avatar out there, I actually saw that there are all these art shops online. And in these forums, people would literally be posting in comments like, this is my style, this is my rate, give me like a week and you'll get this awesome piece of artwork. At the time, I just got into it purely from like seeing all these random forums, like meeting with people, talking to people online. And I would open up Microsoft Paint, which was, you know, the only like free tool that we had at the time. I'd use my little like laptop trackpad mouse and try to draw these shapes. I was watching a lot of anime. I'm like, I want my stuff to look like that. I opened like this random forum on GaiaOnline.com to sell like chibi art, 8-bit, like totally pixelized, really poor resolution, just export out of Microsoft Paint and then give it out to people for like online coins. So that was kind of my entry into it. And from there, I think the rest is history. I think like all these other really inspiring online communities at the time, like DeviantArt.com. I know for some people it's like the forbidden, like you don't want to out yourself with DeviantArt, but it was actually, I think, one of the places where I found my first art community and started like posting and sharing. Again, like all pretty cringeworthy art, but I think the point was more seeing what it was like to connect with people on things that you thought were really niche interests or things that you don't really like share with your friends at school or really talk about with anyone else in real life. That was huge for me as a kid. So I think that's kind of where it started. And then from there on out, just kind of touched it here and there. Loved doodling. It was something I got like yelled at by teachers for. If you yell, like you doodle in the margins, they're always like, you're distracted, you're not being a good student and all these things. So I think over the years, there's always this balance of, I really want to do this. I really love doing this, but I need to prioritize this. Or I'm being told that like it's not really like what I should be focusing my time on in the future. So I think just over the years, finding that balance has always been tricky. But I think one of the really amazing things that came out of something as hard as COVID was dipping back into it, meeting people like you also all online for like a year until we got to meet in person and do all these awesome collaborations together. I think it's just very deeply rooted in connecting with people, even if you don't have anything in common with them in person or it's hard to meet up. I think that's kind of where it started.
Nice. Like how did you like interact with people after you met them online in that community, or how did that go?
Surprisingly, a few people that I stay in touch with, like we'd either end up at like the same college together many years later and connecting. But at the time I was also like an 8-year-old online. So it's probably not like
probably not the best idea.
I think the closest was like meeting up at a Sacramento anime expo. And I think my parents were like, probably not, but I understand. I was like very young at the time.
At least that would have been like a public kind of like meetup. So it would have been a little bit safer.
It could be worse. But I think meeting a lot of people who had this similar like entry into art, like not having formal classes, like not going to an art school, just like spending a lot of time online in basements and whatnot, and just drawing a ton and sharing it with whatever audience was, right for them. I think we were all able to connect with that like years later. It's kind of this very like nostalgic, very not user-friendly like website, but something that everyone just used back then too.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point of just like how each generation has like their own subculture in that way that that generation and our generation only know of like the early internet days of like just those things now that people are born with now in these early or more recent generations. So they don't know like those early entries of like these early forums, these early Paint, like how you said, Microsoft Paint.
Yeah.
So now they're so used to like these advanced like programs and everything like that. That in itself is just like its own subculture at that point.
Like Procreate would have been so amazing as a kid.
Yeah.
I was online safe space. I was online downloading like Paint Tool Sci, like any version of like GIMP or Photoshop I could get my hands on online at the time, just because like we didn't really have access to that. And if you were younger, you weren't like working yet, you're in like middle school trying to get into art. Besides obviously good old pencil and paper, if you're really into digital art, I think you were just limited to these kind of random, potentially illegal avenues of getting your hands on software. So,
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was on the same boat. So like definitely a safe space here.
Just take us both if any.
Yeah, exactly. I think I was even the same way that I didn't get my first tablet, and I'm not even saying it was a good tablet, but I didn't get my first tablet until like art school. So I was the same way where like after a while you just get naturally good just using even the mouse because you're just like that's your limitations. But if it's not stopping you from like creating something, then you're just gonna like eventually get better at it.
Totally. And I think that's actually what's really interesting about having only used a tool like that growing up. It's kind of amazing what you can make. Like I think I'm a strong believer that you can make the most of like the tools that you have or what what paper you're trying to use up, what marker you're trying to use up. Yeah. I think same thing with being on literally Microsoft Paint in the early days. I'm like, it's not bad. I still kind of cringe at some of the art from back then, but I think about what it was like to just find that way to express myself as a kid. I'm like, you know what? It's fine. Yeah, it's fine if it's Naruto fan art.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It gave me a lot of joy back then. So.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And I think you even said like kind of creating like cool avatars and like other people paying either if it's like real money or digital coins or currency.
Yeah.
It's interesting how even those early ideas were all the way back then that are pretty much still being used now, really. Like people like even the game that I work on, it's the same thing that we're just charging people for cool avatars and cool variants and stuff like that. So it's very interesting how it's the same concepts are just being reused nowadays. So
totally, as an early kid capitalist.
Yeah, exactly. You were just like, oh yeah. Like,
yeah, it's kind of the same idea. Like you have a portfolio, you like need to figure out your style, which is the age old kind of artist challenge that you have true. No matter like what age or what stage you are in your art career, it seems like. But yeah, something very formative about that time for sure.
yeah, for sure. I saw that you also went to UC Berkeley. Was there any kind of like things there or classes there that kind of inspired you to get into the creative field, or was it totally like separate?
Yeah, totally. I went in like completely trying to be a doctor, which was very opposite of what I do now. I went in like taking biology classes, chemistry classes, and was like miserable because one, they're really hard and I wasn't very good at it, but also I just wasn't convinced that's what I wanted to do. And I think knowing that this like inner child version of me would have, never seen myself doing that in the future, and like would have really wished that I did something with art or something creative as an adult. So it actually took a while to kind of start pushing myself away from what were more traditionally like viable job paths or career paths. One of the first ways I got back into art was actually through what we call like a decal at school. So they're completely run by students and student teachers. And we had what was called the Art for Animation decal. I joined this, I think, like my sophomore or junior year. It's basically a bunch of students teaching other students how to do like 2D pipeline animation art. Cool. Everything from like writing your story, getting like the story spline, learning the hero's journey, to storyboarding, and even like finishing the class with your own animatic. So that was like a whole different like way to think about art, and also be in a class where you have like crits every week. And these are just students who like want to do this for fun. Like they're not getting class credits. We're not making any money off of this. It's just like people who really love doing this. And I think that was super inspiring. I ended up revisiting that class as like an instructor too, like one of the people who led the little pods and crits. So that was, I think, the first entry back. I brushed up a tablet that literally collected dust. Like it was gross. I couldn't find like the pen nibs anymore. But yeah, just like grabbing whatever I had and feeling that itch to just draw again, to make again. All the times I probably should have been studying for like tests and whatnot. I was like, I actually really want to do this. And like, I really want to like make it better. I think when you're getting back into a skill or like you're trying a new skill, there's some kind of graph where like you have what you want in mind, but then your skills and your like realizability is like here. And then that's when all the motivation happens. You're trying to get from like, I really want to execute on this idea in my head, and like, I might know how to do it, and kind of just like figuring it out and trial and erroring your way up. So I think that's like me getting back into digital art, and also maybe re-downloading Paint Tool Sci illegally again, like 10 years later. Yeah. So that was pretty big. And it's funny, I actually ran into Reniel, who was the other co-instructor at the time when we were teaching that class. And he now does like professional ceramics and like does installations. So shout out to him. He's awesome, doing great work out there. But yeah, I think the Bay Area is also just kind of small. So when you go to school out here, you run into people in like all sorts of fields from all like parts of your past. And that's been really like delightful to see that as well. Even though we both didn't end up in animation or anything that. It's like, oh, okay, we all found our own way of like being creative in the future. Who
were some of your like art influences? Like whether it's just like people you admire or kind of like inspired you to kind of create like your own style or like your own themes of like when you create your artwork?
Yeah. So I guess like one of the things back in college that did get me into art again was that animation course. I was really inspired for a while by this like school. It's Gobelin's like animation school. It's some animation school in France. I don't know that much about all the details of it, but every year they release shorts from either their graduating class or like just current students, which blows my mind even more that these are like students in school making these kind of productions.
Right. Yeah.
But as like a warm up, in the very first 5 minutes of our like animation decal, when people are like trickling into class, usually pretty late because campus is really big and it takes a while.
Yeah.
They would show just a selection of the like 2 to 5 minute shorts from that graduating year's class from this animation school. Super inspiring because you get a million different styles. You get like a ton of different concepts, some of them super abstract, some very like explicit in their meanings. And I think like getting the storytelling inspiration from animation was really huge. Sometimes it's like amazing to just doodle and draw something cute and fun and like feel that joy. But I think something that really did inspire me more based on watching all their shorts. There's one specifically called Best Friend that I love. I think people should watch that. It's only 5 minutes too, so very short, especially if you have like attention span, like things. Stuff like that I think really pushes me to create more of a narrative or a story or start to use like elements in the background to like tell you more about who this character is, like what they like, what they do, kind of what they're going through at the moment. So sometimes I'll throw in like a half-eaten pizza box. I have like laundry on the floor in a lot of the backgrounds of some of my art. Maybe it's a state of my own mind in my own bedroom, but I think those like storytelling details and just the way that animation tackles like character design, background design, environment, like every little detail is intentional. And I think that's something that I really feel motivated to try more of. Again, nothing wrong with just like cute cat doodles because I also do that a lot. But that's probably the biggest source of my inspiration.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's always very crucial because especially when you're talking about shorts, that you don't have the time, you don't have the luxury of time at that point. So you do kind of have to tell these story elements and story in general, overall storytelling in like a compact way. But what you mentioned there is like, if you're able to put layers on that with like all the background or just like these subtle details, then you're able to pack in more of that story in the short amount of time that you're doing it.
Totally, yeah. And because everything is like hand-drawn for 2D animation, like nothing is a mistake. Like every can on the floor, like the trash or the lighting, like everything was very handpicked and like intentional. So I think that's amazing because my brain oftentimes doesn't work in that way. It's like too many things at once. So I think it's just incredible when you get a team of people like that together and, you know, you look at every detail in the background. Like even here I'm noticing there's like the little bird that flies off every now and then, like all these little things. Like it's amazing how people's brains work that way.
It's
back.
It's back. I think the same thing. Like when I was talking to my friend Bennett, who did all the amazing art that you see here. It's just going back and forth of like, oh, can we add these things? And then if we have extra time, they're like, oh, maybe we can sneak this into just because of like, like you said, it would add more to the overall theme of what we're trying to do. But also just like these little subtle storytelling elements that even if we're not trying to tell like a overarching story of a hero and a villain or anything like that, we still want to like come off with some story because that's what I realized later on in life, that us as humans just are very natural storytellers, that we love telling stories and we love hearing stories. So like if we can present that in some kind of way, then we try to do it as much as we can. And
it can happen on the level of like little slice of life, like when we were working on the animation intro for like the Bart scene and everything from the past season. I think there's so much you can capture. It was only like 10 to 15 seconds long, there's no like hero's journey. The train just comes in and out, but like when you look really closely, we talked about like what kind of posters would be in the background, like the lighting from the phone. This was like an awesome suggestion from you. I'm like, wow, I wish I thought of that. And then we put it in there. So just like all these details, like that should move, like the hair should move in this way when the train comes by. And like I snuck in like my favorite artist, Rina Sawayama, as like the poster in the background that's like flopping around. I feel like that's like very exciting and very like fun for me to think about. And especially when you can bounce ideas off of someone else or like a whole team of people. Like, I think the product of like you not giving any feedback or any like interaction at all would have been totally different. And I think it's really like, it's amazing to put that to the face of like what this group does and like for the community, and just have that special lens on it. It also helps when like me as an artist just like stuck in a rut, like not really sure what to do with this like broad concept. I think that's probably one of my favorite parts, just going back and forth, the iteration, looking at the past really messy sketches and seeing how it, you know, finally ended up in the like final cut. And with the music by Kari, like that, like it just felt like chef's kiss. Like this is such a cool process to work on with other people together. No,
like I said, I truly appreciated collaborating with you and the amazing animation that you did with that. I think it's one of those things that kind of like how you just mentioned with the shorts that you were watching, that when you work on something that's either on your spare time or like, if it's just like an exercise that you want to do, there's no real limitations. Like it's whatever you want to kind of create. So I wanted to kind of like give that same vibe when we were trying to do these like bumper animations with the community. That it's one of those things that, as we'll definitely touch on it a little bit with the corporate world that we're both kind of like working in. That obviously there is very like, oh, you have to follow this to a T.
Totally
so to do the exact opposite, I think is very liberating for us as artists. That like, okay, now we have like an open canvas that we can just do whatever we want. There's some direction, but like we're not like limiting your creativity. You can pretty much like go as far as you want, or like as minimalist that you want to kind of go. So I think that's like a healthy perspective. Like it's like, okay, I can kind of put this on paper or digitally or whatever you want, and just kind of really just creatively feel fulfilled at that point.
Totally. And I think like the wonderful limitations that come at us. First of all, I've learned as an adult, like I 100% need like some kind of limitation. Otherwise, like my brain just spirals. But I think some of the really awesome kind of like field work and community work that you've done to inform the direction for these is also really based on like, what are the landmarks, you know, people are drawn to in the area, like for the Art of the Bay pop-up? You know, what are some of the colors or like some of the like even down to what flower and what signs and typography kind of like really resonate with people? Because not only is that something that you know that people are very familiar with, but it's also like, I get to learn something really new, or like I get to learn something more about this like group of like this town, the city. I think that's been really awesome in the creative process. I think you always need to start looking externally for inspiration as well. It is very people driven too. Like people just want to see themselves in the story or see themselves in a visual. And that's, you know, one way to connect. And I wouldn't have learned all those things about Hayward too if not for the project.
I mean, even for me, it was helpful because like I knew some of it, but when, if you just do a little bit more research and you're like, oh, I didn't know this and that and stuff like that. So it's cool to include it as part of that history. Because even if it's not something that you grew up in, at least like, you know, someone else in that community would appreciate it if it gets included at that point.
Like Big Mike. I wouldn't have known about these 20 feet like lumberjack men statues.
I just learned about that the other day, that I guess the original creator had opened up like I forget where it is in Hayward, but he had opened it up because they rarely open up to the public to view it. So I guess they had Big Mike and a bunch of other different like sculptures to like just to go. I was already out of town that day, or else I would have checked it out.
Yeah, several people came up when we were tabling in Hayward. Like, we know that. We're like, we know that guy. We've seen him around. Yeah.
Do you like what you see? Many of the studio items are made from local artists. Learn more about each artist in the episode description. Thanks again, and let's jump back into the episode.
So this season, as we're wrapping up the season, pretty much we wanted to kind of get different perspectives and just advice from different artists on that side of it, of like vending at events or expos and pop-ups and stuff like that. So for your experience, like how long have you roughly been like doing events like that, like tabling or vending or whatever you want to call it?
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of a vending baby, probably relative to a lot of other people who have a lot of experience in this. I started actually with my roommate Elin. She's at Yarn and For You. She does amazing fabric arts and crochet pieces and everything. We were at Syzygy, which is like an art co-op in the Mission in San Francisco. We found out about that whole thing through Sketchboard, where I was figure sketching.
Nice.
I know y'all know each other.
Yeah.
Shout out Nat. You know, that group does such amazing work in the community as well. So it started from just like kind of very shy, passively figure sketching, and you know, me being introverted, I'm like, okay, I should probably meet someone. You know, over all the sessions I was doing that, like slowly got to make a ton of new friends, and they had like posted this open call for their art market in the summer, and it was me and Elin's last month living in the Mission together. So it's kind of like our send off and kind of our way of also like, hey, let's just do this thing together. We're both creative. Like, you know, it'd be great to like put ourselves out there and meet people. So when we went, let me tell you, we were super unprepared, I think, relative to what I'm now used to and like what I've seen in like, you know, people who have a lot of experience in this. We brought like a giant piece of butcher paper and a Sharpie, and we were writing prices day of. We're like asking like, how much should this cost? You know, like, is this too much? Is this too low? Okay, we'll just write, ask me for the price and all these things that like, you know, other people, it's like a whole art itself. You know, people spend like weeks preparing and like make really cute signs for everything, but we were just out there like frantically hunched over our table, like writing on the table on this butcher paper that we're ripping off. So I like to say we probably come a long way from that day, but I think that was our first time, and it was really amazing. There was like live poetry being read. There were vendors from photography to screen printing to what we're doing, like more digital printed stuff, and fabric arts, as well as like polymer clay earrings, like all sorts of vendors there in the space. It's really beautiful. And I think like, I wish I produced more merchandise to be able to do a lot more of this, but that was definitely the first one. And I think it just have such more memories of all the people we met and like all the friends that came to visit, and also just being inspired by, again, people with different mediums and spoken mediums, physical mediums. Fast forward, I'm trying to remember if we had done anything else. It's probably just my morning brain, but the Art of the Bay pop-up was definitely like the biggest one we'd been a part of, and at least like the most involved I've been too in like the planning and the art direction of the event. And I think by this time when we came around, like we had probably like another year to create even more art. I think just feel a bit more like rooted in my style. So going from selling just whatever I had and just like all sorts of different pieces from the last like 2 years of like casual art making at home. And like, again, I also like print and make all my stickers at home, which like leads to probably a lot of carpal tunnel. But it's also kind of this, you know, random mix of everything that I thought was my style or like that I'd made before. And I think what was nice about doing it and reflecting on it like 2 years later at the most recent pop-up is kind of just this feeling of, okay, I think I kind of know what I like, or, you know, people are telling me and coming up to me, like, oh, like your color is what makes you stand out. And like, this is how you recognize your style. I'm like, oh, cool. That's good to know. Cause I didn't realize this. Like, I'm just going to let other people, you know, tell me, because sometimes when you're just in your work too much, you get in your head a lot and don't really know how to describe yourself. I think it's just this continuing journey. So I'm always very envious of people who are super confident in like their style and what they like to make, and like their like motivation behind each piece, especially if it belongs to this collective theme. So starting to get there, that's probably like been the nicest like reflection of the last pop-up, and also just continuing to table next to some incredible people and meet like amazing artists who just spend the whole day with you, bring you some snacks, and like, you know, everyone's just really supportive too. No one's like scary and intimidating. It's so warm.
Yeah, I think that's been the beauty of like when my friends and I used to vend more often, and from 2015 to before the pandemic. It was the same thing that I think it was some of the events that we had gone to where it's like more like a mass thing, like at the convention centers in San Jose and stuff like that. So those were more for like businesses and like other like large corporations, that we were kind of like separated into like a smaller or smaller artist alley.
Artist alley, yeah.
So they were cool there. Like you still meet some people, but it wasn't like, it didn't feel like a whole community versus like doing more of the intimate kind of smaller pop-ups and stuff like that. That's where I got that same vibe that you were describing, that at that point, like, yeah, it felt like everyone was like doing the same, not doing the same thing, but just having the same spirit. And yeah, just super friendly and just like able to kind of like talk to each other, kind of bounce ideas. It felt very similar to what we were just talking about earlier. And that's what I really enjoyed and was trying to like put together with the event that we did. But yeah, I'm glad that you got that sense with like the neighbors and everyone else throughout the event, that it was just like a good, friendly environment.
It was so special. I think when we showed up for the pop-up, we were bringing stuff out from our car. We're parking like, oh my God, like we got to go get this thing set up. We run into like Steven in the parking lot. Most people I hadn't met in person ever. So he's like, hey, how's your leg doing? I'm like, but then I connected. I just have a slow reaction time. And that's so special. Like I had this climbing injury from earlier in the year where I tore basically everything in my left knee. And like a lot of this year was spent recovering kind of the mental and physical journey from that. To have that be like the first thing someone asks you when you're at this event, you know, I'm feeling very like out of place. Like I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready for this. Like everyone's like such a legit artist here. To have that be your first interaction of the day. So special. He's super sweet. And then he was tabling just like 2 tables down from me the entire 8 hours. So yeah, I think your ability to like create a group like that, create an environment like that, it's very meaningful.
Oh, I appreciate that. Like I said, it's just one of those things that I feel it's just like luck, but also fate too. That, like how you said, especially here in the Bay Area, that it's a very small community now. Especially now that you start interacting with people or going to different events, that you start seeing some of the same faces over and over. That after a while you're like, oh, okay, like they're really in it as well with this type of creative community that is around the whole Bay Area.
Totally.
But yeah, I think one of those things that I was going to ask you too is like, as an introvert, how did you feel at that event and the first event, like to kind of come out of your shell a little bit, to like chat with people about, especially your creations? I feel like that's very hard to kind of communicate.
Totally. It's kind of like when you're a little kid in school and you're drawing something, like, can I see what you're drawing? Or like, can you draw me? And you're like, oh, I want to hide. Even this, I feel like is like getting out of my comfort zone, which is good. I think what's been helpful is like you had a team of volunteers. Like we all knew each other like well before the event. Like you were saying, the Bay isn't as big of a place as you make it to be. Like you can really like create these like small communities where you know everyone. It's really comfortable, or like that they're all super supportive. Not gonna lie, it's still very scary. I think part of it is like one, being introverted and like, do I have the battery to make it through today? And be excited. What was helpful is that like for my first event, at least, I was tabling with my best friend, and so it was much easier to like hype someone else up versus like be that for myself. So we're like in the same space and just like, I don't know, bouncing off the same energy from each other. And events like the pop-up that we had done, again, like knowing that I had kind of interacted with a lot of the people in some way, or like people are coming up with, did you do this shirt? We were told like someone here made these designs. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's me, I guess. And it is good because oftentimes too, these kind of interactions or like feedback or comments from the community, like you do start to get a better sense of like who you are as an artist. And that is kind of the really wonderful part, especially like COVID and like I work remotely for my day job. There wasn't always like a ton of like face-to-face interaction. And especially with like, if you're like a primarily digital artist, there's not that many opportunities to like see stuff and like be having this tactile experience and like literally giving it to people. That's and have true, people come up to you and like touch it and kind of look at it and like make all these like amazing comments and be supportive of the stuff laying in front of you. I think that definitely feels very profound to me, at least in a way that like you can get through like comments and like meeting people online. But this was just so different and new for me. And I just had to be there and accept words of affirmation and things like that. And I was like, wow, this is very sweet and very nice and a little scary still. But I think what's also great for events with volunteers, or like if you're with friends, like you can kind of dip out, go meet other artists, have someone else kind of take over for a little bit and have your little recharge moments. There's always like downtimes too, where you know, just like lunch hour or something like that, where it's pretty chill. So all in all, like the setup was, you know, kind of perfect for finding a good balance during the day and recharging after. But I will tell you, I fell asleep right away on the car ride back. Like, I don't have a car. I'm never the driver. So I just passenger princess and like pass out on the car ride home.
It's so interesting because like with you, Melissa, and a couple other folks that have come on the podcast, like I can spot your artwork at like a mile away. Like if you put like a pile of different artists and like just had some samples of your work, I could easily spot it.
Oh wow!
But why do you think that is? Like that perspective of just like not being able to kind of like identify it, even though like you do it on like a regular basis of creating different art pieces. Yeah, and you're not alone in this. I've had friends and like even people who are seeing it for the first time. They're like, oh yeah, like this is a style, like it's unique. I think where I really struggle is I've faced this so much in writing applications for things, or like, you know, writing little bios that are just a paragraph, you know, super short, very low stakes. And suddenly I'm sitting there with like just the cursor blinking, like, I don't know how to describe this. I know what I like. I know when I don't like certain parts of my art. I do think so much of it probably boils down to imposter syndrome and feeling like you need some huge, like philosophical, like meaningful, deep background for explanations for your art. But a lot of times, you know, it's as an artist, it's enough to just be happy doing it, feel some joy and just really like love what you're making. And even if the style is like the colors that you use, that's intentional. Those are decisions. I think sometimes when you get caught in imposter syndrome, you don't see that makes you like a quote real artist versus like a casual hobbyist. I think part of it used to be too that I don't do like art as a full-time career. Like I didn't go to art school, and it's something that I feel very privileged to do like on the side that I really love doing. But honestly, in this economy, most people are doing like several jobs, if not like just being an artist. So I think that's actually the benefit of, you know, in 2023, that's probably fading away a lot. And being an artist doesn't have all these like barriers like they potentially used to have. So I'm learning to get better at it, but I do think that was probably a big part of like, I don't even know what to call this if I'm only, you know, just like a hobby artist or like a part-time artist. But we're getting better. We're getting better at that. I think just need to hype myself up a little bit more. But also I think it's nice to have that flexibility, and, you know, your style isn't just like cute cats, or like it isn't just like girls in their bedroom, which is what I do a lot of. But, you know, keeping it something more high level, or just something that allows you to expand out of that too, I think is nice. So yeah, I'm going to work on being a bit more intentional on calling myself an artist and having that like distinct way to describe my style in the future. But that's probably why it was difficult before. No, I totally understand. I think it's one of those things that when I started thinking about like a metaphor for it, it's good that you're trying to like go outside of like your comfort zone too, also within your own art style. I kind of compare it to the Beatles, where like the Beatles, when they first started, they were very kind of like the modern like boy band kind of like perspective, that they just played a lot of like poppy hits. And then in time they kind of like evolved and kind of more into like experimental music and just kind of tried different things as they evolved, versus like nowadays it's harder for artists, or I should say musicians, to do that, because they notice like the only way to make money is to make kind of like these mainstream kind of type music, that it's hard for them to really experiment and also be like profitable. So I think it's one of those things too, is like there's no knock on anyone if they do like a cutesy style or anything like that. Totally. But it's also the thing too, like if you do push yourself as an artist, then I think there's some fulfillment there. Like you probably know like if it's either going to be financially successful or not, but I think it's just one of those things that, like just to challenge yourself of like pushing yourself to do something new at that point.
Yeah. I don't know a better way to describe it besides like when I am genuinely really excited and it has all those pieces I'm looking for. It's like I like it visually. Like I really love the concept. I think it's pushing, or like I'm able to tell a story in a different way, or like this is something I didn't really like try to capture before visually. I like want to draw like all the time, or like right away, like right after work. I like go to my desk and I'm like, I'm gonna do this right now, or like that one like ugly sketch, and I don't know, I have what I call like an ugly sketchbook. So you just do your scribbles. It's really low stakes. I think there's a lot of pressure to have very beautiful sketchbook spreads nowadays, so having the ugly one is nice because like when you do have that inkling of what you're excited about, and it kind of matches like all the criteria except maybe profitability. If it like gets you really excited, you want to do it right away. There's other things that I worked on where I'm like, am I finishing this just to finish it? Because I started this idea and I really want to see it through. Other times when I'm just so excited, it's like a race to the finish line. Like I just want to be working on it all the time. And I don't know if that's healthy or not, but there's this like kind of this like consuming excitement that happens. And I feel like getting older just meant that I know sometimes when that happens, just to, like trust my gut and go with it. And then sometimes it's okay to like step away from projects or sketches that, you thought might be good, or like maybe would be good at a market and like do well. But something in you is like, I don't know, your gut feeling probably tells a lot more about whether you're really proud of it in that way. Versus something that will do well. So I think there's always that balance to kind of figure out too.
Yeah, for sure. With that format, do you tend to like kind of keep those ideas and then slowly work on them? Or like how you just mentioned, do you have an idea and then automatically just want to like start and finish that idea? Like,
yeah, it's usually more of the latter, but I do keep, I'm like an Apple Note hoarder. Like I should really just have a notebook at this point. And I do, like, it's not like I don't own a journal, but sometimes if I'm just on the bus, or like I've even gotten inspiration from just like window watching. I do a lot of window watching when I'm like around the city, or just like on a train or something like that. You get all these like little glimpses and scenes, and you just need to like put it down somewhere. So even before it becomes a sketch, I just have like this ugly dump list of like things in my Apple Notes that make no sense if you're trying to read it as an outsider. Also don't really make that much sense to me, even though I wrote them. So that's always kind of this backlog. And it goes back to something we talked about earlier on, like, do we have this like theme? Like, what's your like overall story as an artist? Like, do you really care about this thing? Like, do you like to tell stories about this thing? I think like keeping that like what I call the dump list is helpful, because you do get to kind of pick and pull all your raw ideas and like kind of make sense of it. A lot of times I've like tried to make sense of a piece like retroactively, because going in, I just trusted my gut, or I just got excited about it. And then sometimes it takes you a while to step back and look at it afterwards and be like, oh, actually, this makes a lot of sense. And sometimes it's like friends telling me, oh, this makes sense because you do a lot of scenes like this, XYZ. I'm like, oh, you're right. You should write my captions and descriptions moving forward.
Cool. I know we're slowly wrapping up, so I just want to make sure I get to certain questions before we head out. What would you say have been either some of your favorite projects that you've worked on solo, or kind of like we were just saying, like in a collaboration manner at that point?
I think this still counts as a collaboration, but the animation that we worked on is probably one of my favorites, because I hadn't touched animation in like years at this point. I may have even like messaged you to like, I'm pretty rusty, but I'm down. Like I'm down to try. And that was really amazing. It's like the whole process from start to finish and storyboarding again. I think that really brought me out of like whatever rut I was in at the time, and just feel motivated. I also learned I need deadlines. So it's like, it gave me something tangible to work towards. I think with animation, you can get in a rabbit hole of like, it's going to take forever, so I'm just not going to do it. And it's hard. But no, that was really fun. I think it's one of my favorite things. And it's probably one of like our earliest interactions too, like getting more involved with the community in that way. I actually much prefer those types of projects than like fully solo projects, which I know is kind of the more like cool lone wolf artist, like visual. I did another animatic about sheep like over COVID, and it was fun. It was energizing, but I think it exciting in a different way. I was proud of it in a really different way that is probably less similar to what like I do now and the kind of projects that excite me now.
Right. Oh,
so
nice.
shout out, like that was one of my favorites for sure.
Do you have like the sheep one out there, or is it just like your own thing?
It's somewhere on my website.
Okay.
It's they were corporate sheep at a company called Moogle. So I was going through something at the time. It was before I started my full-time job. That gap between senior year summer and like working full-time was just going through it. Like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life.
No.
What did I sign up for? That was fun. I drew like 500 frames of different sheep motions. What a time.
No, like I said, I respect you and like all animators just because it is a very, I feel like it's one of those things, hopefully, that don't get like overrun by AI or anything like that. But it's still as an old art form that back then to now, even with the modern tools that we have, that it's still a very time consuming process. Like no matter what, like no matter how many edges you try to like shave off or anything like that, it's still going to take like a long process.
Totally. Like you start from the very basics with the ball bouncing, the flour sack falling. Like those were things we learned in like our first weeks of the class. And here I was today still like taking little iPhone videos of me standing a certain, like how do you like move in that way? And then how do you make it look accurate, but not like a photo or like robotic? Like how do you bring your own style and character into it? So that on top of like, hey, this is a tangible project. We, there's a certain like constraint in world that we're like drawing this for, and there's like music and other elements that you have to work with. So I think that was very fun for me. I don't have to just spiral in my own world.
For sure. One other question I just thought of like on the spot. Has there been anything that has like creatively challenged you where like, it was something that you had done before that was maybe intimidating, but maybe you, by challenging yourself, that you kind of like were able to kind of go through it and actually complete it? Or maybe you don't even have to complete it, but even just the attempt of trying something new at that point. Yeah,
totally. I think I actually get this the most with like any personal commissions. Like for some reason, I think the like references or like the way that I know I want it to look really accurate to whatever the person requesting wants. This happens sometimes with like pet portraits or like people portraits. I had done some portraits for this awesome like Asian Americans working in like the justice system and like starting to like advocate within the community. They wanted portraits of some of their main like interns and community members for that semester or summer or year. And it was so hard for me at first, especially while I was trying to find my style still. Like, I want this person to look like what they're supposed to look like, but I also want it to not be something that feels totally out of my style or doesn't really feel like I made it at the end of the day. So I have so much respect for people who do caricatures, because like, how do you do that in like 10 seconds and like really capture the most like kind of outstanding features of someone's face or like their body? So for me, that was really tough. I think I ran very close to the deadlines on those, or like almost procrastinated to a point where I'm like, I'm not sure if I can do this and like what I'm making and also like meet the customer's needs. So eventually it was fine because, paid gig, you're going to make the timeline eventually, like you're going to get it done, right? But I think creatively, I struggled a lot with that. Not because it was technically hard. It was totally in my wheelhouse, like digital art, portraits, color, like everything I knew how to do and I've been doing for years. But that was like hard. And that was only 2 years ago. So I guess still on this journey very much. But I think the balance of like, especially not coming from a trained background where you know perspective super, super well, like you've drawn these like beautiful portraits that are hyper realistic or done a ton of master studies. Those are on my list eventually to like do more of for practice. But because that already wasn't my style and I wanted to like make them like cute, kind of like cartoony style or bring in whatever I was drawing a lot of at the time, that was a big challenge.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad that like you did it, and also you're just kind of going into that path of just like improving or just trying to get more experience in it. So
thank you. At the end of the day, it gets done, and then it gets better next time.
Exactly. Awesome. Before we head out, did you have any shout outs that you want to give out, or
Yeah.
just any mentions? Yeah, either way.
Huge shout out. Well, one, Nando and the Art of the Bay community. That one goes without saying. And also huge shout out to Nat with Sketchboard. I think like that group specifically in the mission and Suzuki like brought me and my roommate so many like new community friends, and also just so many hours of like good art, good talks, like good music. It's such a unique space, and something that I hope never goes away with anything changing in SF too. So yeah, two of the main shout outs for art community things, and also my roommate Elin at Yarnin for You for always supporting and driving me everywhere we needed to like get the supplies, get set up. I think so many people go behind events, but also in your everyday life of keeping you motivated, bouncing ideas off each other. It's easy to get stuck in a creative rut. So anyone to help pull you out, like that's the important work.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's why we have friends, family, and community members to help that in those moments that we definitely need them at that point.
Totally.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and we'll toast to all of our accomplishments that we've done so far. It's just the beginning. I know it's just the beginning.
Just gas ourselves up a little.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Awesome. And I want to thank everyone for tuning in as well, and we will see you next time. Take care.
Thanks again for listening. If you enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform. Follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and other social platforms to catch new episodes and updates. Want to learn more about the items and music featured in this episode? Links available in the episode description. Thanks again for listening, and take care!